Look around into the him.
How are y'all doing?
Fine.
Wonderful. Now, I came here today looking for my grandson, and I had never met him before today, but I had the great pleasure of meeting him earlier, Mac Lyons, right there. Great-grandson, excuse me, and he has great-grandchildren himself. Several of them, from what I understand. Now, our family name was probably not always Lyons. A lot of families had their names changed when they came to this country. Some because they wanted to change their names, make them simpler. But some of them had to change their names because officials here couldn't understand or couldn't spell our real names. And unfortunately, that makes it really difficult sometimes to find out who some of those long ago relatives were. But I know that my family came from a German area called Rheinpfalz, from the town of Lamsheim. And in the 1840s, Jews there found that anti-Semitism was back. Everybody had thought or hoped it was gone. You know, things have been pretty good for a while. People were starting to talk about Zionism, about the Jews returning to their land, having their own country. And non-Jewish Germans felt offended by that idea. And the German states were also trying to unite, and many non-Jewish Germans felt that Jews couldn't become good, patriotic Germans. Now, a lot of folks, including my family, thought something like, oh, no, not again. Been there, done that. This time we're leaving. I want you to understand, though, that my family was not Zionist. We were not going to what would become Israel. We were going to America. Religious freedom, free enterprise, lots and lots of land. Yes, that would work for my family. So my family moved from Lamsheim, Germany, to Louisville, Kentucky. My father, Gabriel Lyons, my mother, Hannah Felsenthal Lyons, and little old me. When I grew up, I moved to Arkansas, to the tiny, tiny town of Augusta. I had some land and a small store, General Mercantile, and now this is hard, but I might as well tell you, I owned some slaves. And look, I couldn't work the land and run the store at the same time, and so I did what others around me did. I bought slaves. I told myself that everybody else was doing it, that I had to do it to survive economically, that I couldn't change the culture of the whole area myself, and I suppose that was true. I also told myself that there were slaves in the Torah. And not just when the Jews were in Egypt, but also when they were in the land, they owned some of their servants, at least until the servant worked off a debt, and so that was also true. And I can tell some of you are shocked by this, or at least dismayed. Well, good. You should be. I didn't know it at the time, but I know now that slavery was a terrible thing. But here's what I want you to take away from this. Here's how I want you to think about it. I want you to think about looking around at your world right now. Take a look at your society today. What about your world doesn't seem quite right? What seems unjust today? And now I want you to ask yourself how your great-grandchildren are going to think about you when they learn about society's failures today. Think about that, right? How are you going to live your life today, knowing that you are going to be judged 170 years from now? Hindsight. I didn't have it then, but I have plenty of it now. And anyway, I eventually fell in love. I fell really, really in love with Sophia Kahn. We married, we had some children, including Mac's grandfather in 1861, and then our world changed. Now, what changed about my world? War. The War of Secession. I've never heard of it. The Northerners called it the Civil War, and since they won, maybe that's what you call it today. It was a terrible, terrible time. And I decided to join the Confederate Army. But first, I came to Little Rock to sell my slaves. Now, you may not have realized it, but you live in a town where slaves were bought and sold. And then I sent Sophia and our children back to Louisville to stay safe, because I wouldn't be around to protect them. So I headed off to Memphis to enlist, and Sophia and the children began the long journey by wagon up to Kentucky. Now, after the war, she told me a story, that on the road, she came across a wounded Confederate soldier trying to escape danger. And courageously, she offered him a ride, but only on one condition. The soldier had to remain hidden. See, she did not want to risk being caught harboring a Confederate soldier if discovered by Union soldiers. So she did what a lot of other women at that time did, and she took a risk. And she hid that Confederate soldier under her hoop skirt. Scandalous. Now, you may ask how long he was hidden under that skirt, but I was too much of a gentleman to ask, so you shouldn't either. I saw plenty of war, too much in fact. Even though I was a general, or an officer, excuse me, and an engineer, I saw a lot of terrible things. I fought in the famous Battle of Atlanta. It was a terrible scene. War, death, destruction, and inferno, death on both sides. I can't even think of the words to use it. But eventually the war ended, and I was still alive. And at the end of the war, the only thing I could think of was Sophia. The only thought in my mind was, Sophia, come back. Come back and let's go home. So when she came back, our first stop was back in Augusta. There was a bit of business I had to attend to there. And see, I forgot to mention, in all that talk about coming to Little Rock to sell slaves and send Sophia and the children up to Kentucky, that there was something else I had taken care of. Before the war, I took all of our silver down to the White River, found a spot where I knew I could find it again, and I buried it, knowing I would be able to find it there. Nope. The White River had moved. Who knew? Never did find the silver, but someday somebody might find some Shabbat candlesticks and a Kiddush cup washed up on the shore. So that was it for Augusta for us, and so we moved first to Hot Springs for a short time, and then to Little Rock looking for better opportunities. Now here in Little Rock, I started a poultry store on Louisiana and 2nd Streets, if I remember correctly. Now you may not know what a poultry store is. A poultry store is where people select live chickens. That's right. People select live chickens that they plan to eat that night for dinner. And the poultry store will butcher them for you. Or at least that was the plan for all the chickens I had. I actually got into a little bit of trouble a couple times. See, people were always coming to the store and selecting the very best chickens for themselves, and they would leave all the scrawny and more homely chickens. Well, I didn't have any use for those chickens, right? So I let them go. Open the door, send them into the back alley. Shoo, shoo, go on, go live the good chicken life. What's wrong with that, right? Well, the police had a different idea. They came to question me several times about those dismissed chickens. Apparently, the neighbors were a little bit concerned about the side effects of all the chickens in the alley. But I was not about to be taken to task for a bunch of chickens that were no longer mine. No. I had a comeback line already. Officer, how can you be so sure those are my chickens? Do you see my name on them? No? Well. Anyway, time went on, as it often does. And then, tragedy. My beloved wife, Sophia, died. Here's her grave. You may not be able to see the date from where you are, but it's July 29th, 1877. And if you see the date on mine, April 15th, 1897. That's 20 years, folks. I missed her every single day of those 20 years. I missed her so much that life began to lose all meaning. And so that night, the night I died, I came up here. I stood right here at her grave. And I said, Sophia, I can't live without you anymore. And I'm going to die with you. a lot of people assume that I committed suicide. But the truth is, I died of a broken heart. Thank you.